All right. Well, hey, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Heromakers Podcast. Boy, you guys, before we hopped on this podcast, we were talking about this amazing little town up in Michigan, which is not near our guest, but sort of near our guest, called Frankenmuth. And it was getting me into Christmas. I have to say, it's only October and I'm into, is that wrong?
It's too early. I'm sorry.
You think it's too early? Like, is that 8 weeks, 10 weeks?
Like Christmas shopping, like 6 months before Christmas.
Oh, man. I don't know. Maybe it's just this year, right? Where it's like, I just need something to kind of be like, oh, like there it is, right?
You would probably like my neighbor's sign. It counts down to Christmas. It's up at 99 days.
I love it. So it's
like,
up.
It's up. It's been up for the past, I don't know how many days we have left, but it's been up since 99 days and it's counting down. And I'm like, oh Lord.
I need one of those. We actually have a neighbor who has like, they start at 30. I'm like, 30. That's like
For a wimp.
A wimp. Yeah. So you guys, that actually was Sasha, our guest. So today on the podcast, I'm very excited. Ann keeps saying that we have a lot of runners on this podcast. So I said, well, that's because I run. And I said, if I played lacrosse, maybe we'd have a lot of lacrosse people on here. But I find too that runners often have like amazing stories too, right? Because it's like, there's just something that goes with like overcoming obstacles and all that. So we want to welcome Sasha Wolff to the podcast today. And Sasha is founder of this amazing community called Still I Run, which she is going to talk to us all about. And Sasha, first, before we get started, and you're going to tell us all about yourself, congratulations, because I saw that you just finished a virtual Boston Marathon, 26 miles virtually. So tell us, like, really quick, how was it? How was that?
It was actually a lot more fun than I thought, because I got to map out the course and I mapped out all my favorite places in my neighborhood. Not neighborhood, but like city. So around a lake and around a park and over bridges and stuff. But let me tell you, it takes a really special kind of person to just run 26.2 for fun.
I think you're right.
A good time, but good for you.
So some people may say it takes a special person to run like 2 miles. Or like, oh, that's
I said I would never do a virtual anything over like a virtual 10K, because realistically, it's it's the race atmosphere you go for, but it's Boston, and like it was probably my only chance to get the unicorn medal, so I had to do it.
Yeah, well, wow. I mean, congratulations, but you probably didn't have to deal with the hills, right? Because aren't they known for like the horrendous hills out there?
Yes, they are.
Okay, my hand is up as like the non-runner. What is the unicorn award? What's this?
What's the unicorn award?
Oh, so I just got my medal. I'm gonna grab it.
She's showing us. You got, and for those of you who are listening to this podcast, now you got to hop over to our YouTube channel to see this. Also, it's a Boston Athletic Association, and it's a unicorn.
Yep, that is like the logo. So it's always like you're chasing the elusive unicorn, and you earned it.
Oh, I love it.
Did it.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's a lot of dedication, a lot of training. Yeah. It's amazing. Well, I mean, that's not really why we're talking, but we are talking because yes, your organization is about running. So, but Sasha, tell us a little bit about you and kind of where you're from and how you just introduce maybe a little bit about what Still I Run is, because I want to talk about later. But
yeah,
how did you launch your organization?
So Still I Run is right now the nation's only community nonprofit for running and mental health. And I founded the group in 2016, and our goal is to defeat the stigma for running, promote the benefits of running for mental health, and then also creating like a safe space for people to talk about their mental health and running journeys.
Okay. And now why was this, tell us about like yourself and kind of why this was a personal effort for you.
Very personal. Yeah. So I was diagnosed with depression and anxiety back in 2003 when I was in college, and, the health services clinic at the school just gave me a prescription for Prozac and a pamphlet and like, here you go. And so I didn't do anything for my mental health aside from that until 2011. So I did no maintenance of my mental health. I didn't tell anyone about it except for my mom. And in 2011, everything kind of just came crashing down because I think I got to the space where my depression outgrew the medication that I was on. So ended up at a mental health hospital for a week to be treated for depression and anxiety. And one of the things that they recommended, aside from maintaining your health care and your mental health care and medication and therapy, get into a healthy habit. So I chose running because it was something that I had kind of done on and off before. And it felt so good to do that first, like, walk, jog, waddle, whatever you want to call it, after I got out of the hospital. But that's when I really connected the two pieces of running for mental health. And I really wanted to connect with other people who were doing the same thing. Like, the running community is amazing. And I thought, I can't be the only one running for mental health. There has to be a group out there. And I looked for 4 years. I Googled everything and I couldn't find a group of runners for mental health awareness. And I figured I guess I would have to start one, which is a huge leap of faith and a huge opportunity and call to be vulnerable, because in order to have anything successful come out of this, I would need to share my own story. And that was really the first time I went hugely public with saying I was in a mental health hospital. And from there, people started coming out of the woodwork saying they had no idea. They run for their mental health as well. And today, 4 years later, after officially starting, it's a vibrant community, which is amazing. I was not anticipating that.
Which I think demonstrates the need, right? That there was like a longing for this. But so Sasha, one of my coworkers years ago, I remember when, maybe this was 3 or 4 years ago, and there was a couple big stories that were coming out with some leaders who were struggling with some mental illness. And I remember he had asked, because I'm in editing and writing, and he had asked if he could write an article on this topic. And he's like, Laurie, I've never told anybody that I struggled with severe depression, and he was hospitalized and all this. And I remember, I'm like, you've never told anybody about this? I mean, his family knew, obviously, but
Yep.
Talk to us about, well, first, tell us about just the numbers, so that we can kind of get a clue of how prevalent, people who have depression, who deal with depression, anxiety, and then also why is there such a stigma behind this? Is it like a trust thing? Is it shame? What is it?
Yeah, so one of the biggest numbers out there for a mental illness is 1 in 5. 1 in 5 people, adults, every year will be diagnosed with a mental illness or a mental health disorder. That's a lot of people when you think about it. Think of 5 people. One of them, or maybe more, likely deals with depression, anxiety, PTSD. So it's very common, but we don't talk about it because there's that stigma around it. And I think culturally, starting a long time ago, people who had a mental illness were seen as abnormal, or they were possessed, or, we used to lock people up for having just a minor mental illness. Mothers who had postpartum depression would be, put in straitjackets and put in a room by themselves because we didn't understand that what they were going through was just an illness of the brain, which in reality is the same as an illness for your body. And I think the stigma is super prevalent because we really want to appear like we have it all together. And if you have a mental illness, that means that, you're not strong enough. And physical illness is way more important because you broke your leg and you couldn't help it. Well, I have a mental illness and I couldn't help it. I have a lack of serotonin in my brain, something I cannot help, and I need medication to help with it. So there's just so many things wrapped up with the stigma, I think.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this too, because last spring when COVID kind of came onto the scene, and a lot of people seem to be talking about that, like the health, if people who actually get COVID, right? And the health risks and all of that. But what was going on in my mind is that, you know, now that people couldn't go out, like the rise that was going to happen. And sure enough, boy, I mean, if you look at some of the articles, you know, CNN came out with one not too long ago, just talking about the, just the higher rates of depression, suicidal tendencies, anxiety. I mean, and all these things that are underlying that are part of it, right? With just being at home, maybe being in an abusive relationship, like there's all these things.
I know.
And so is it just because we can't see it? Is that why we don't talk about this?
Yeah, it really is an invisible illness. Looking at me right now and like my personality and how I live my life, you would not know that underneath there's like a constant struggle and a constant war going on. Depression doesn't always show on the outside. Sometimes it can. Like when I was in the lowest of lows, I would have really bad headaches, really bad brain fog. My heart would beat super fast. I'd have like sweating going on, stomach aches, not eating, which leads to other things. So if your mental illness gets to a really bad spot, it can turn into a physical ailment as well. But I think it really is the invisible part of it that makes people just kind of forget it or push it aside.
Well, obviously our brains are just like, the scientists just always admit that our brains are just way more complex and so difficult to understand. So obviously mental health is like an issue, like, and I feel like what you're just saying is that you're just such an overcomer, and everybody who has a mental illness is an overcomer in order to keep going and to be a functioning person in society, you know, despite everything.
Yeah, and that kind of plays into the mantra behind Still I Run. Like, running is hard. There are people that just don't like it.
Ann is raising her hand right now.
and the fact that there's some of us out there that can get up out of bed every day dealing with a mental illness and still run, like Still I Run, that's incredible. They're like true mental health warriors, regardless if you're running or doing yoga or walking, whatever it is that you do. It's impressive.
Yeah. So then I'm curious, like, because you obviously connected our mental health with physical health. So like, that's cool, because obviously we're a whole person, spiritual, physical, mental, but like, how did that help you? Like when you actually attached running to your mental health?
So for me, it was a couple things. You know, running, any type of exercise increases the serotonin in your body, which increases the chemicals that I am in need of. But on top of that, it's, you know, I just feel better physically when I'm getting out there and running as well. And it is a whole mind and body thing. When your mental health starts to fail, if you don't have good mental health, it's going to impact your physical health, and it can go either way. There are people who have chronic pain, and they sometimes have mental health issues because they are in that chronic pain. So they're so closely linked. It is unreal.
So Sasha, tell us about launching your organization. Like, okay, so here you are, and you know, you're like, okay, running is good. It's going to help me. And then how does that translate into launching this whole nonprofit? Like, at what point did you realize, like, okay, this is big enough that, you know, I do want to launch my own nonprofit? And then how did you get the word out? Like, what was the whole process of that?
Oh, it's been an interesting one. So I started Still I Run kind of just as I'm going to put it out there into the world and see what people think. There's a lot of runners here in my area, and I was connected to a lot of them on Facebook. So I was like, hey, maybe they'll be interested. Maybe my neighbors and my friends and family will be. And then it turned out to be much bigger than that, because I was being vulnerable and telling my story, and that got more people interested. So when I launched, the idea was just to have like a running group community. And then within a couple weeks, people were like, hey, how do I donate to you to get Still I Run going, and like bigger programs and whatnot? And I the goal was not originally to have a nonprofit. It kind of just became one. So I went through all of the hoops and hurdles with the state and to get my official 501c3. And, you know, today that's what we are. And all the money that is given to Still I Run goes into the different programs we have. And it is, I work full time as a communications specialist for a company in town. But my goal is to make Still I Run my full-time job someday. That I think is my purpose, which sounds weird to say. There are people out there who never know what their purpose is, I think. But I know my purpose is to build Still I Run into, I really hope, a national movement.
Well, okay, so you mentioned other programs. So so you have running, so people are running. Are there other like groups, or are there places where people kind of share their story or connect in other ways?
Yep. So one of the programs we have is the Lend Your Voice program. That is for people who just want to share their story of running for mental health, and they can submit their story on our website. And then that will get shared out on our social networks. People can also get connected by joining our private Facebook group. And there are, I think, close to 4,000 people that share their stories of running for mental health. But then we also have another cool program that isn't really running related, but it's awesome. It's called the Run, Write, Fight program. And the idea is that anyone can ask for a letter of encouragement from a team of writers in the Still I Run community. One of our writers will take an actual pen to actual paper and write you a note and send it off to you in an envelope, like real live mail. And people really enjoy just getting that in the mail, that little letter.
So will they send you like the names of people that they love?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. You can request one for yourself, or you can request one for a family member that you think could really use a little pick-me-up. But it's been really cool because people will respond back to us and say, hey, I really appreciated this card. I needed this, and it's on my fridge, like as a regular reminder. But the coolest program that I have to admit, and the one I'm most excited about, is the one that I just launched this year. It's called the Starting Line Scholarship. And the whole idea behind it is we want to help people get into running for their mental health. Regardless if they've ever run before or they just need help getting back into it. But for non-runners or people that don't run often, sometimes there are barriers to that. Like, I don't know what kind of shoes to get. Maybe I can't afford the shoes. I don't know how to find a race. I don't know how to train. I don't know where to find a plan. So the Starting Line Scholarship takes care of all of those barriers. We will provide runners with a proper pair of running shoes, a shirt, shorts, socks. We give them some Still I Run swag, so like a hat and a water bottle. And then we also pair them up with a coach who will coach them through a 5K or 10K, and we will pay for that registration for them. And then on top of that, if they so desire, we will pair them up with someone in the Still I Run community to be a mentor. So the whole idea is we give these recipients all the tools they need to get to the starting line, and then with everything they've learned and all their tools, they can get to the finish line on their own while we're all cheering them on.
That's so great. I love that you're actually putting everybody in community. So that would totally help with my mental health issues, like already, if I just didn't feel so alone, which is kind of a big deal, especially during COVID. It's just like the isolation factor, and especially because the gyms are all like locked down too, and you still need to get some exercise out there. Oh yeah,
that's been real quick. I was gonna say that's been the interesting thing, because when I would talk about Still I Run, people would be like, well, how do I get involved? And I would tell them it's mainly virtual. Like, that's just how it is. And today, like, everything is mainly virtual. So it kind of worked out in our favor right now.
Oh, we've been virtual for years.
Yeah.
I also really appreciate the letter writing. And if I could go back to the Christmas theme, you guys, if you write
I would love if you go back to the Christmas theme.
I don't know if I'm going to be bursting any bubbles out there, but if you write a letter to Santa and you sent it to Canada and the postal code is HOHOHO, it comes to a block away from my house.
That is fantastic.
Oh,
The Canada
fun.
Post Office, and they actually have volunteers that write back in paper and pen, and beautiful, amazing souls that write letters back to the
Oh,
Oh man. The art of letter writing. Okay, so this is like a lost art, Sasha.
it is. It totally is.
I know. I got I don't know, 4 or 5 months ago, I got a card in the mail from a friend of mine, and I was so excited because it was like the first card. I mean, you get texts, right? You get texts, you get emails, but there's something about somebody putting that stamp on, right? Writing it. It's like it takes effort to just do handwriting nowadays too, and I love it. It's like going back to the basics in some ways, right?
Yeah, I love it. So the team of writers that I have, it's all just volunteers. Everything at Still I Run is volunteers, but I provide them with stamps, envelopes, and stationery so that all they need to do is just sit down, take some time out for another person, write a wonderful little note, and pop it in the mail.
Yeah.
So great. That's so great. Yeah. So, okay, so I'm gonna, okay, so one of our hero traits, Sasha, is integrity. And the way that we define that is like being the same person on the outside that you are on the inside, right? So, you know, a lot of times with our social media profiles or something, we tend to be all happy, right? Or like all smiley and yay. And then we shut it down and then we cry and we're like, oh, I only have 2 likes on my last post or whatever. I'm telling you, social media, it's like, oh, it's good and bad. I don't know. But from your own experience, okay, so you were wrestling with depression for a long time. Nobody knew, right? And then all of a sudden you started sharing your story with other people. What was that like to all of a sudden just kind of like the things that were inside like bubbled out? Was that hard? Did you have to pick and choose who you were telling?
So when I launched Still I Run, I didn't really have an option of who was going to see it. And that was scary as all get out. I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown, who I'm sure you've heard of her.
Me too. Yeah. Yeah.
She kind of inspired me. I read her book, Daring Greatly, about like being your true authentic self and how when you're vulnerable, and you're telling your story, sometimes you can help others through it. And so that kind of gave me this jumping off point where I'm like, I'm going to do this. If I have depression and anxiety and there needs to be a reason for it, maybe the reason is to hopefully help others feel better about having a mental health issue. So it was very scary, but today I'm super open about it. I will, you know, pre-COVID, I would go to like dinners and people would ask me what I did and I'd tell them about my 9-to-5 job. And then I'd tell them about Still I Run, and then I'd be in a restaurant and I'd be like, yeah, I was in a mental health hospital for a week, like just dropping it. Like it's totally normal, which is.
It is.
And that's the thing. Like I'm making my mental health just a normal piece of my life, as if, you know, I went to the hospital for a heart disease or a gallbladder removal or something. But, you know, the one caveat I want to put out there is it took me over 10 years to finally share my story. So this is not if you have a mental health disorder, like you should tell people. Obviously you need to be in a good spot and be ready to do it. It took me a long time.
Okay. So especially now, you know, with COVID around and, you know, how do we care for people who we know maybe have a history of struggling with depression, anxiety, and how do we care for them well during this time? Is there anything special we can be doing?
You know, even though we just talked about letter writing, sometimes just dropping a text to someone that you haven't talked to for a while, or you may be wondering about them, just that quick little check-in, that little bit of human connection, even if it's just a text, really helps out. I know that my mom and I, she lives in California, I'm in Michigan. We've been just connecting more through text messaging, and we both have a mental health disorder. So that's really been helpful. And if you are so inspired to write a letter or drop a little note, that is also super helpful. And even Zoom get-togethers. This I communicate with people nowadays, and I didn't like it at first, but now I really like it. Yeah. So just to check in.
Well, and I think it reminds us that we're not alone just by being on Zoom and seeing another friendly face, right? So, okay. So, and for people who are struggling right now, who don't have a lot of community, what are some tips?
So it's funny because I have a love-hate relationship with social media in general. Still, I run.
I don't think you're alone, Sasha. I think it's the same thing, right? Where people just don't want to admit it. Like,
yeah. So I think that social media can be a good spot to connect with people. I'm not trying to like brag up the Still I Run community at all. But the people in there, they're just so welcoming and they understand what you're going through. And it's that, that little piece of connection, even if it's happening through Facebook. So I highly recommend finding those good inspiration groups out there on Facebook or Instagram. If you aren't on social media, there are a couple of other resources I like. One of them is, I think it's called either America Mental Health or Mental Health America. I always flip the words, but they have some amazing resources out there, as does NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness. And they're like, I think they're the country's largest grassroots mental health organization, and they've got resources and things to connect to and virtual events. They have, in-person events and will in the future. But those are just really great resources to get connected to right now in the time of COVID.
Yeah. So, and I think, can I add something to that too with social media? Is that I think as we engage with social media, actually like reading people's responses and listening. So I was on a Facebook group a couple years ago, and it was like this thread of people who have, I think it's digestive issues, and one of the people on there was posting about how she was really struggling right now and having a hard time. And, she had said, well, I think I've just had enough. Like, I just can't keep doing this. And in the thread, people kept talking. Cause you know how in threads, it's like, sometimes people don't read the comments. They just kind of post their own comment and it keeps going. And I read that and I reached out to her because I was like, well, are you okay? I read your comment and she was like really honest. And she's like, no, like I've been dealing with this issue for 3 years. I've had enough. And so, we offline, we were just chatting, and so I think the importance of really being present on social media too. Is that a thing? I mean, can we actually be present on social media?
Yeah, well, I think that just goes with even with in-person communication. There's a lot of times where we're talking to someone, we're not talking with them, we're talking at them. And it's important to just listen and actually hear what the person is saying. And I think that can totally be for social media as well.
Yeah, good, thanks.
Like personally, I think there's a lot of, maybe it's me, but like just a lot of fear, maybe of like, oh no, what will people think if I admit to this? Or will they think I'm a weak person? Or will they be worried about having their small children around us? You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, it's irrational, completely irrational. But also like, if you don't struggle with mental health issues and then you're like, I don't know how to help. So I'm also like, if I connect and ask that, is that like too personal? Because I feel like we just are so worried about invading personal space. So what would your advice be for me if like, I'm like, I don't know how to help, but I have a feeling this person's really having a hard time?
So one thing that I really like to do to sort of break the ice, regardless if I know the person really well or not, is I'll ask them how they're doing. And they, everybody gives the cursory, yeah, I'm good, everything's okay. And then I go, really? Are you really? And like, I'm serious when I do it, even though I wasn't just now. I'm serious when I do it. And a lot of times that tends to open people up and the words just kind of fall out. Because if you are dealing with something, it's been at the tip and the surface for so long. And when someone finally is like, tell me what it is, it's just this verbal vomit, if you will.
Wow.
I had a coworker, Sasha, that, sorry, Ann, and I'm going to let you continue, but I had a coworker, and he used to, when he wanted to really know how we were, he used to say, how is your soul? And it, like that, it's such a, like a deep question that it kind of catches people off guard, and you're like, oh. So, I mean, even just like that, letting people know you want to hear the answer.
I like that.
Right.
So. It also gives like a person a chance to pause and actually think, really check in with their soul, and then actually be able to answer. So I really like that. And I would just follow up and say, if you're gonna really ask and be really interested, you have to wait. And really wait to hear the real answer, and then really be present. And then, like, if you're gonna go there, you should be committed, like ready to be with them for not just the next 10 seconds.
Yeah, like I definitely wouldn't pose that question in the coffee kitchen at work, like as you're like passing by with coffee. It would have to be the right setting.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Sasha, what's next with your organization? You want to turn this into a full-time thing. You have all these great programs, but like, what does the rest of the year look like for you, and then 2021?
So coming up in the month of November, we will be opening applications for our ambassador program. That was our very first program we ever launched, and it's just like a regular ambassador program, but it's full of people who are super passionate about talking about running and mental health. It's a good way for other people to share their story instead of, just me. Because one thing that I've always said is I don't want to be like the poster child for running and mental health. I'm interested in what everybody else has to say. And the ambassadors give me the chance to just kind of sit back and, elevate everyone else's stories. So I'm super excited about that. And then hopefully, depending on what COVID has in store for us, I really want to launch our national run chapter program. I have a lot of the pieces in place, but it's all about people who are passionate about Still I Run that want to bring just a running chapter to their city or neighborhood. And, we were going to launch it in 2020, like springtime of 2020, and that obviously didn't happen. So I'm really hoping that we can do that. The other piece then is just, there's a lot that Still I Run does with just volunteer time. So I really want to invest more of my time into the programs we have instead of adding more. So I think after the National Run chapter, we will just focus on making our other programs bigger and better.
Well, I love how you just like kind of throw out. You're like, oh, we're doing this and this. So I have like, I'm writing these down, Sasha. And I have like 6, right? You have lend your voice, share your story, run right, fight, the starting line scholarship, and then you have the ambassador program, national. So you're like 6 things outside of just like run.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a lot.
This is the entrepreneur in you. So I just give, for somebody who sees a need for something and doesn't see a lot of resources, like what's your encouragement to that maybe budding entrepreneur who wants to make the world a little bit better? Like what's a step or two that person can be taking?
I'm probably taking on more than I can handle, but if they want to reach out to me, they can. Like, I am an open book. I had no idea how to even start anything like this, but I've learned a lot along the way. And then the other thing is just having a deep passion for whatever it is you want to put out there as an entrepreneur. It's going to take a lot of time and a lot of sacrifice. So having the passion there is super important. And I say that because like I've said before, I have a full-time job, but I also have 2 little girls and a husband. And so it does take a little bit of time away from them. But I was talking to someone about that the other day, and they said, your children are going to see your passion and you are making the world a better place for them. So that kind of helps me with that. But, everything aside, it's going to take passion. It's going to take a little bit of sacrifice. And if someone wants to reach out about how to be an entrepreneur, I could talk to them about, the things I've learned over the years.
Well, I feel like what you're doing is because you're compelled to.
Very much so.
I mean, I think your daughters would love it if you actually did something that gave you life, right? So you're going to be a better mom because you are now like giving hope to other people, building community, encouraging others. And then this ambassador thing is awesome. I love that it's not just all about you.
Yeah, I don't want to be an influencer.
But that's so great. And then also, I just appreciate how you're just encouraging others to step out. And it's okay, honestly, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, if you have this idea, you're just like itching to get out into the world, it's also okay to fail. Like, I think you're afraid to fail, but I think if you just start, just go.
Yeah, one of my jobs I used to have before the company I work for now, it was a software company, and one of their things with developing software is you're going to fail, but you fail fast. So make your failure, then start over again.
Yeah. Well, you know, my dad used to say that, show me somebody who's never failed and I'll show you somebody who's never done anything.
Yeah.
That's the key, right? Oh, I love it, Sasha, because I feel like, you know, another one of our hero traits is actually humility. And so my daughter said to me the other day, she was dancing. I said, do you want to be a dancer? She's almost 9. And she's like, no. She's like, I want to be like the number 2 person. I don't want to be the one out center. I want to be the second person that's kind of helping the first person, but I'm sort of there. And I feel that's a little bit like what you're saying, right? Where you're like, I don't want to be an influencer. But your humility kind of comes through in this. And I really appreciate that. I feel like that's a really good, you're a really good model for somebody who has this entrepreneurial spirit, who's doing something to help other people who have felt maybe silenced, right? Their stories were silenced, and you're making our world better. And so I just want to say thank you, because I just think it's incredible what you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So Sasha, where can we find you on social media or on the web?
So I have my own personal Instagram if people want to like learn about how goofy I am, which is just at Sasha Wolff. But all of the Still I Run stuff, it's Still I Run on Facebook, Still I Run Community on Instagram, and then our website, which is stillirun.community.com.
Good. Okay. Well, thanks for being on the podcast with us. And everybody, I hope that you love this show. And more importantly, I hope that it opened your eyes to the fact that a lot of us are struggling with some private stuff that be great for us to be safe spaces for other people. So grateful to Sasha that you're providing that community of safety for people. And as a runner, I want to say thank you for lifting up running as a great way to relieve stress too. And if you guys love this podcast, then give us 5 stars, give us a good review, and we'll see you next time.